The air that evening felt unusually heavy as Natalie Jameson pulled into the cracked driveway of her childhood home in Maple Ridge, Ohio. The low autumn sun cast long shadows across the yard, and a bitter wind slipped beneath her coat, biting at her skin. She turned off the ignition, staring at the dim porch light flickering like it too, wanted to give up. In the passenger seat, a cheap grocery store cake sat in a wrinkled plastic bag. White frosting, red letters, "Happy Birthday." The letters were crooked, misspelled even, but she hadn't bothered correcting the teenager who boxed it. It wasn't for a party. It was just something. Some attempt to mark the day. 30. She was 30 today. She walked up the steps slowly, expecting nothing. Her parents hadn't celebrated her birthday in years, but part of her still hoped for maybe a card, a word. Anything. Inside, the house was warm but strangely sterile. The kitchen table was already set. Meatloaf, boxed mashed potatoes, and overcooked green beans. Her father, Raymond, sat at the head of the table in his usual position, glass of whiskey in hand. Her mother, Elaine, was fussing with her napkin, eyes avoiding hers. "You're late," Raymond said flatly, not even looking up. Natalie placed the cake on the counter, its crinkling louder than expected in the silence. "Worked late," she replied evenly, "had reports to finish." Elaine didn't respond. Raymond grunted. He poured more whiskey. She took off her coat and hung it on the same wooden peg she had used since she was 7. Dinner started without a word. The only sound was silverware scraping ceramic and the occasional cough. No one said, "Happy birthday." No one even looked at the cake. Natalie pushed her fork into the food, barely registering the taste. Her chest tightened. Something was off. Not just the silence, but the tension. Too rehearsed. Too still. Midway through the meal, Raymond slammed his fork down, making Elaine jump. "You're too old to be freeloading," he said, cold and certain. "It's time you left." The words didn't register at first. Natalie blinked. Her eyes darted to Elaine, hoping for some soft rebuttal, some sign this was just one of Raymond's drunken bursts. But Elaine just stared down at her plate, lips pressed white. Natalie's voice remained calm. "I pay the electric, the internet, half the mortgage. I buy the groceries." "That doesn't mean you live here forever," Raymond shot back. "You think paying some bills makes you entitled to stay?" She didn't speak, didn't cry. She just looked at him, really looked, and saw nothing of the man who once carried her on his shoulders. Just a bitter shell, feeding off her, now discarding her, and it hit her. This wasn't spontaneous. It was planned. They had chosen today for a reason. Her birthday wasn't something they forgot. It was the deadline. Without another word, Natalie pushed her plate away. The food, the tension, the cake on the counter, all of it sat like stone in her stomach. She stood. Raymond smirked like he'd won something. Elaine's shoulders folded in shame, but not resistance. Natalie nodded once. Got it. And just like that, the family she had supported for a decade let her go with the same coldness they'd always shown. Only this time, she was done pretending it didn't hurt. Natalie sat in her car, engine still off, her breath fogging the inside of the windshield. The cake box sat unopened in the passenger seat, slightly crushed now from where she'd dropped her bag on it. Her chest ached with the kind of quiet, grief that didn't scream or weep. It just settled like concrete in her ribs. She didn't cry. Not yet. But her fingers trembled against the steering wheel. Then her phone buzzed. A message lit up the screen. From Madeline, her cousin on her mother's side. They hadn't spoken much lately, but Madeline had always been one of the few family members who seemed to genuinely care. "Hey, I heard what happened tonight. I wasn't going to say anything, but You deserve to know. It wasn't about freeloading. Raymond and Elaine were talking about cutting you out weeks ago. Serena's the reason. She said you're too controlling with money. She wants full access to your parents' finances. Said you're in the way. Natalie stared at the message, her stomach turning. Her hands moved quickly now, scrolling up through the conversation. History. A week ago, Madeline had sent a selfie from the farmer's market. 2 weeks ago, a meme about burnt-out millennials. Nothing out of place. Nothing to warn her of the gut punch now sitting in her inbox. Serena, her younger sister, the golden child. The one who hadn't held a job longer than 6 months but always managed to spin her failures into victimhood. The one Natalie had quietly bailed out of 2 overdraft fees and a parking ticket last spring. The one her parents still talked about like she was some misunderstood genius. And now, the one who wanted Natalie out. Natalie's jaw clenched. She had always suspected Serena resented her control over the finances, especially after their parents started depending on Natalie for everything from budgeting to loan payments. She'd never flaunted her role. It just had to be done. Otherwise, everything would collapse. And now Serena wanted that control. Not to help. To own. To manipulate. Natalie tapped out a reply with mechanical precision. Thanks for telling me. I needed the truth. Madeline replied a moment later. I'm sorry, Nat. I didn't know they'd do it today. Not like this. It's disgusting. Natalie swallowed the rising nausea in her throat. Her parents hadn't just kicked her out for being too old. They had chosen this moment, her birthday, because it would cut the deepest, and because Serena had whispered enough poison to make cruelty sound justified. All those years of paying bills, fixing emergencies, skipping holidays to work overtime, all of it undone with one convenient lie. The worst part? They let it happen. Her parents didn't fight for her. They didn't defend her. They gave her to Serena's ambitions like she was an obstacle to be cleared. Natalie took a deep breath, staring at the quiet street ahead. They hadn't just erased her presence from the home. They'd rewritten the story, turned her into the problem, to justify stealing the life she helped hold together. But if they thought silence was her weakness, they were about to learn otherwise. Natalie drove aimlessly for nearly an hour, the town's streetlights blurring into glowing streaks through her windshield. Her phone lay face down on the passenger seat next to the dented cake box, still unopened, now forgotten. She didn't need any more messages. The truth Madeline had sent had already cracked something deep inside her, something that had been held together for far too long with hope, denial, and duty. She finally pulled into the parking lot of an old strip mall, deserted except for a flickering sign over a 24-hour laundromat. Turning off the engine, she sat in the dark, letting the silence expand until it was unbearable. She had been used. Not just this year, not just this birthday. For years. The signs had been there. Subtle, easy to ignore if you loved hard enough. The way Raymond would grunt instead of thanking her when she paid off the last installment on their overdue property taxes. The way Elaine would forget to mention her in holiday cards, but still call when the water heater broke. The way Serena treated her like an unpaid intern, texting only when she needed money or advice. And Natalie? She had called it love. She had called it responsibility. She remembered missing her college graduation ceremony because the car needed new brakes, and her parents couldn't afford them. So she stayed behind, paid for the repairs, and watched the live stream alone. She remembered canceling her trip to Chicago because Serena maxed out her credit card again and didn't know how to tell Mom. Natalie had stepped in. Again. Quietly. Like she always did. And each time she'd believed, deep down, that maybe this was the time they'd finally see her, appreciate her, love her for who she was, not just for what she gave. But the truth was uglier. She wasn't their daughter. She was the resource. the family accountant, the emotional shock absorber, the invisible scaffolding holding up a house of unspoken debts and twisted loyalties. And the moment she became inconvenient, they didn't just push her out. They rewrote her as the villain. Natalie pressed her fingers against her eyes, but the tears didn't come. There was no room left for grief, only realization. Cold, clear, and final. They never saw her. Not really. They saw what she could do for them. She had sacrificed vacations, birthdays, relationships, herself, believing that love was something you earned by being useful, believing that if she just gave enough, carried enough, they'd choose her back. But tonight proved they never would. And for the first time, she wasn't going to chase that illusion. She wasn't going to buy their love with one more sacrifice. As the night deepened, a strange stillness settled over her. Not peace. Not yet, but something close, something like resolve. Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and brittle, the kind of day where even the air felt sharp. Natalie stood in the center of her now half-packed bedroom, the dim light filtering through her curtains, casting long, tired shadows across the floor. The same bedroom where she had stayed up late balancing her parents' bills. The same space where she'd skipped dinners out, dates, and vacations, so she could funnel more money into a house that never really felt like hers. Today, she wouldn't make them dinner. She wouldn't bring home a pie or pretend to be grateful for the crumbs of their affection. Today, she would disappear. She sat down at her old desk, the one cluttered with envelopes, to-do lists, and receipts that had become second nature. Her laptop whirred quietly as it woke up, the familiar hum sounding almost ceremonial. Her hands were steady. Her heart wasn't racing. That surprised her. She thought there would be more fear in this moment, more hesitation, but all she felt was clarity. She logged into the first portal, the electric company. Her name was the only one on the account, always had been. Her father had once let them power lapse in December and left them shivering for 2 days. Since then, she had taken over, never mentioning it again. Remove payment method, confirm cancellation. A soft click, a cord severed. Next was the water bill, then the gas, then the auto insurance policy that covered both her dad's ancient pickup and her mom's aging sedan, cars she hadn't driven in years, but had paid for faithfully. Remove vehicle, confirm, done. She moved to the bank account, the one her mother had begged her to keep, just in case. Joint access, they'd said, for emergencies. Natalie transferred the remaining balance into a private account she had quietly opened 6 months ago, back when the uneasy feeling first began to settle in her chest. Then she locked the joint account. Down. Auto payments stopped. Emergency funds frozen. She moved methodically, like a surgeon in the middle of a quiet, bloodless operation. Each cancellation wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. She wasn't taking anything from them. She was simply stopping what had never been reciprocated. The final tab, the internet. Her parents binge-watched streaming shows every night, never once questioning why the bill was always paid. Never asking who made sure the Wi-Fi worked when they FaceTimed family, streamed sports, or checked Facebook. Cancel subscription. Effective immediately. She leaned back, staring at the list of confirmations now sitting in her inbox. They looked clinical, impersonal. But they were the most intimate boundaries she'd ever drawn. It wasn't about Thanksgiving anymore. She had nothing left to give thanks for in that house. They didn't just push her out. They let her believe that love required her to disappear, and then blamed her when she did. Today, she chose to reappear for herself. And the silence that followed wasn't loneliness. It was the sound of freedom echoing back. By noon on Thanksgiving, Natalie's phone lit up with a vengeance. Missed calls. 7, 12, 19, Elaine, Raymond, unknown numbers, then voicemails, some frantic, others ice cold. Her inbox became a gallery of guilt. She sat on the floor of Nora's tiny guest room, the heating barely keeping up with the crisp Ohio air. A cup of reheated coffee steamed in her hands as her phone buzzed once more. This time, she answered, but only to silence the vibration. She didn't need to hear what they were saying. She already knew the script. The first voicemail played without prompt. "Natalie, this is your mother. There's no power, no heat. The internet is down. Did you cancel everything? This is beyond petty. We raised you. How could you do this?" She almost laughed at that last part. Raised her? More like raised their expectations of her usefulness. Another voicemail chimed in, this one Raymond's unmistakable bark. "You think this makes you the bigger person? You're proving us right. Selfish, ungrateful. You think we'll beg you to come back? Don't hold your breath." Natalie's fingers hovered over the delete button, but instead she paused. She saved the messages, not for nostalgia, but for evidence, just in case. The next text came from an unknown number, likely a relative who hadn't spoken to her in months. "Family doesn't abandon each other like this. You could have handled this better." She rolled her eyes. Where were these opinions when she was the one holding everything together? When she was covering bills in silence while Serena borrowed money that was never returned? When Thanksgiving meant cooking alone while Elaine criticized her stuffing and Raymond watched football, beer in hand? They weren't upset that she left. They were panicked because she took their safety net with her. Natalie tossed her phone on the bed and stood up, needing to breathe. Nora, always perceptive, appeared at the doorway holding 2 mugs of tea. "You holding up?" she asked gently. Natalie nodded. "They're spiraling." Nora's expression didn't change. Good. That word. Good. It struck Natalie like a warm, protective coat. It was good. Not because she wanted to see them suffer, but because their spiral proved what she had always feared deep down, that they had only ever loved what she did, not who she was. She turned off her phone. Not silenced. Not do not disturb. Off. And for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like a choice. They could rant. They could guilt. They could spin whatever narrative helped them sleep at night. But Natalie was no longer a line item in their budget. No longer the invisible daughter carrying visible weight. And she didn't owe them an explanation for choosing to stop being their unpaid insurance policy. Thanksgiving dinner would come and go without her. But she had already been absent from their hearts for years. It was just past 6 p.m. when Natalie pulled up to Serena's apartment complex. A sterile, overpriced building with faux luxury siding and a lobby that smelled like lavender-scented bleach. She hadn't planned to come. She'd told herself she was done. That silence was her answer. But after the voicemails, the blame, the cowardice, Natalie needed one thing before she left it all behind. Closure. She pressed the buzzer. The intercom crackled, then Serena's familiar voice, sugar-laced and suspicious. "Hello? It's Natalie. We need to talk." A pause. Now's not really a good... I won't ask again. Another pause. Then the door buzzed open. Natalie stepped inside, her boots clicking sharply against the polished floor. Each step reminded her of the years she'd supported this very lifestyle. Serena's rent when she got laid off, her groceries during that wellness retreat phase, even the down payment for the car parked out front. Serena opened the door, in fuzzy slippers and a designer sweatshirt, eyes wide but mouth tight. "You look like hell," she said flatly. Natalie gave a humorless smile. "Good. Let's talk." Inside, the apartment was spotless, curated to look effortless. The wine rack was full. The thermostat, no doubt, was still powered by Natalie's money. She stayed standing while Serena flopped onto the couch like she owned the world. "I assume this is about Mom and Dad losing their minds?" Serena asked, examining her nails. Natalie stepped closer. Her voice was low, calm, but sharp. "No, this is about you." Serena raised an eyebrow. "I know you've been whispering in their ears, telling them I'm controlling, that I'm in the way," Natalie said. "And I know you waited for the perfect moment to have me removed, on my birthday." Serena didn't deny it. "I just said what we've all been thinking," she shrugged. "You act like paying a few bills makes you some kind of saint." Natalie's hands clenched at her sides. "I didn't need to be a saint. I just wanted to be a daughter. But while I was saving that house from collapse, you were building a story. One where I'm the villain, and you're the helpless victim." Serena rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. You always need to be in control. Maybe this is what freedom looks like." Natalie leaned in just slightly. "You call it freedom. I call it sabotage. You think you're winning because you've got their ears now. But you're not smart enough to realize you just destroyed your own safety net." Serena's face twitched just slightly. "You'll run out of people to blame," Natalie continued. "And when the lights go off and the bank account hits zero, they'll turn on you, just like they did to me. And when that day comes, I won't be there." She turned to leave, but paused at the door. "You didn't push me out. You set me free." And with that, Natalie walked out, boots steady, back straight. She didn't slam the door. She didn't look back, because Serena wasn't a threat anymore. She was just another hollow voice in a family that mistook loyalty for leverage, and Natalie was finally done being leveraged. It was 2 nights after Thanksgiving when Dylan received the message. He had been lounging in Serena's apartment, scrolling absent-mindedly through his phone while she flitted around the kitchen, reheating takeout and humming off-key. The buzz of an unknown number pulled him out of his haze. The text was short. No greeting. No explanation. Ask her who really paid for this place. Attached were 6 photos, all receipts, all in Natalie's name. Rent, electric, internet, even the security deposit. Dylan blinked. At first he thought it had to be a mistake, a prank, but he recognized the amounts, the dates, even the address. It wasn't just a suggestion, it was evidence. His stomach tightened. Across the room, Serena chirped, "Want red wine or white?" Her tone was light, oblivious. Dylan didn't answer. He scrolled through the rest of the message. A PDF followed. Itemized. Bills dating back nearly 4 years. Each one paid by Natalie. One note stood out at the bottom. She never asked for thanks, only to be seen. For the first time in months, Dylan realized. He hadn't seen Natalie at all. He only knew what Serena had told him. The dramatic older sister, needy, manipulative, obsessed with control. But the Natalie in these documents wasn't that. She was a provider, a protector, the backbone of a crumbling family system. And suddenly, Serena's constant complaints about Natalie being obsessed with playing the martyr, always inserting herself, never minding her own business, took on a darker shade. He stood up. "I need to ask you something," he said, his voice sharper than intended. Serena froze. "Okay? Why is Natalie's name on your rent statements? Why was she paying your bills for years?" Her face paled. "What? That's old. From when I had that bad job. She offered. I didn't ask. She paid your car too, and your credit card." "Dylan," Serena snapped, "why are you even listening to her? She's manipulating you." "I'm not listening to her," he said flatly. "I'm reading her receipts." Serena's mouth opened, then closed again. She searched for her next lie, but Dylan had already seen enough. The illusion cracked, and through the cracks, the truth flooded in. "Do you even care what she gave up for all of you?" he asked. "Or were you too busy making her the villain?" Serena didn't answer. She just looked away. In that silence, something between them shifted, Dylan walked toward the door and grabbed his coat. Maybe I've been listening to the wrong sister. He left without another word. Later that night, Natalie's phone buzzed. One new message. From Dylan. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I see it now. Whatever they say, just know. You were never the problem. Natalie stared at the screen for a long time, her heart steady, her breath calm. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. The truth had finally started speaking for itself. By the following weekend, Ridgeway wasn't quiet anymore. The town was buzzing. Not from the usual small-town gossip about bake sales and football scores, but from the slow unraveling of the story Cullen and Elaine had spent years curating. The narrative that Natalie was ungrateful, selfish, impossible to live with, was starting to fall apart. It began with whispers. Outside the grocery store, Mrs. Timmons, Natalie's old Sunday school teacher, murmured to her neighbor while rearranging a basket of apples. Did you hear? Natalie paid their mortgage, for years. In the hardware store, a younger clerk leaned toward Mr. Collins, the owner, and said, I saw her shoveling their driveway in the snow when she was 16, alone. He just stood there yelling at the TV. By Monday, the whispers turned into questions. People remembered things. Small things that didn't seem like much before but now burned in the light of truth. A neighbor recalled seeing Natalie hauling a new water heater inside the house alone, while Elaine stood on the porch complaining about her bad knee. Another remembered the fundraiser Natalie organized when Serena claimed she couldn't afford her books for college, only to see Serena post a vacation photo the next day. The tide had shifted, and Ridgeway, for all its flaws, had one redeeming trait: a long memory. Natalie didn't post anything. She didn't make a public statement. But somehow, pieces of the truth leaked. Screenshots, receipts, quiet corrections offered over coffee shop counters and church pews. Even Father Brennan, the priest who'd once gently chided Natalie for not being more forgiving, now stood outside after Sunday Mass, shaking his head and muttering to a deacon. Maybe she was carrying more than we realized. Back at Nora's apartment, Natalie watched it all unfold from a distance. Friends texted her updates like they were live reporting a slow-motion reckoning. Cullen went off on a postal worker today, said he was being watched. Elaine didn't show up to her book club. Mrs. Landry asked if she could send you a pie. She said you deserved better. Natalie sat by the window that evening, a cup of tea in her hand, watching the soft orange light of dusk spill over the rooftops. For so long she had been invisible, not unseen, just purposely overlooked. Her kindness mistaken for silence. Her sacrifices twisted into obligations. But now the town was seeing, not because she shouted, but because the truth doesn't need a spotlight. It only needs time. And slowly, it was speaking, loud enough for Ridgeway to hear. The decision didn't come in a burst of rage. It came in stillness, at 2:11 a.m., as Natalie sat alone at Nora's kitchen table, lit only by the soft hum of the refrigerator and the gentle buzz of her laptop screen. A folder sat beside her. Inside, nearly a decade's worth of proof, receipts, emails, bank transfers, utility bills, mortgage payments, photos. Every dollar she'd poured into that house. Every sacrifice tucked quietly beneath the rug of family duty. Every time she'd patched a roof, paid a bill, fixed what her parents had broken, financially, or otherwise, without asking for thanks. She hadn't planned to go public. But when Cullen posted a Facebook rant comparing her to a selfish snake who abandoned her sick father, and Elaine left a voicemail sobbing that Natalie was destroying their good name, something shifted. They wanted the public's sympathy? Fine. Let the public have the truth. She began with the facts, cold, clear, irrefutable. Screenshots of her name on the electric bills, her bank statements showing automatic withdrawals for the mortgage, the insurance policies in her name covering their cars. A photo of the ladder she stood on to fix the roof while Cullen drank beer, below. Then came the timeline. Age 22, paid off their credit card debt. Age 25, canceled her own vacation to cover emergency plumbing. Age 27, paid Serena's rent for 6 months. Age 30, kicked out on her birthday. Her final paragraph was quiet, unemotional. It read, "When they told me to leave, I didn't just walk away. I took with me the only thing that ever held that house together. Me." She hit post. At first, nothing. Just silence, the kind that made her question if she'd done the right thing. But within 10 minutes, the notifications began. Likes, comments, shares, dozens, then hundreds. Messages from classmates, neighbors, even people she'd never met but who said, "I see myself in this." One comment stood out. "I used to believe, Cullen. Now I feel sick. You didn't leave them. You freed yourself." Underneath Cullen's latest defensive post, people began to push back. "You bragged for years about not paying bills. Now we know why." "Sounds like you miss her money, not her. Funny how the internet cuts out and suddenly you remember you have a daughter." Elaine's pity plea backfired too. Someone posted, "If she was so cruel, why does every receipt show her name on the line?" Natalie watched it all unfold, with a strange calm. Not joy, not revenge, just clarity. The lies they built like a house of cards were collapsing, not because she tore them down, but because the wind of truth finally blew through. By sunrise, the town wasn't talking about her shame. They were talking about her strength, and for the first time in her life, Natalie didn't feel invisible. She felt real. The apartment wasn't fancy. The floors creaked, the windows whistled when the wind picked up, and the kitchen faucet had a stubborn drip Natalie still hadn't figured out how to fix. But it was hers. No more joint accounts. No more names on someone else's bills. No more begging for space in a house that had never really been a home. This place, with its chipped white cabinets and secondhand furniture, was a beginning. Natalie moved like someone reclaiming gravity. Every morning, she made coffee without, wondering if anyone else had used the last of the beans. She folded laundry with the windows open, the breeze rolling in over her small potted plants and bare wooden floor. Peace, she learned, wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself with fireworks or celebration. It came in the silence between responsibilities that no longer belonged to her. And that silence felt like freedom. She never heard back from Cullen or Elaine. Not really. There were a few last gasps, a poorly written cease and desist letter that went nowhere, and some distant relatives who tried to play neutral. She let them all go. Deleting contacts had once felt cruel. Now it felt like clearing space. One afternoon, while unpacking the last box in her closet, Natalie found it, the tiny plastic birthday candle from the cake she'd carried upstairs on the night she was evicted. She turned it over in her palm, the cheap wax now slightly bent, the wick untouched. She almost threw it out. But then, with a small breath, she placed it on a shelf above her desk, not as a memory of pain, but as a trophy. Not for what had been done to her, but for what she had survived. That night, she sat by her window with a glass of wine, watching the city breathe in slow pulses of light. Children played down the block. A neighbor's dog barked. Somewhere, someone else was learning how to choose themselves too. Natalie smiled softly. She hadn't just escaped a toxic family. She had rebuilt a life they could never take from her. One, made not of guilt or silence or sacrifice, but of self-respect and peace and choice. As the sky darkened into soft velvet blue, she whispered the words she used to be too afraid to say, "I am enough."